This is The Front Stretch on AM 590. Brought to you by Joe's Karting. Online at joeskarting.com.
Welcome back to The Front Stretch. This is turn 4, where we're going to talk about the EFI changes that NASCAR has implemented, and then also some of the changes we've had for rule changes, because they've changed a lot of rules that we need to make everybody aware of for the Daytona 500, because there is going to be some major changes, and it's not going to be last year's Daytona 500.
No.
We're going to see a different race coming up in a couple of hours when they throw the green flag. First, Andrew, you're our new infield reporter.
Infield reporter. Used to be tech guy, now I'm the infield reporter. Regardless, I'm the guy that knows it all, right?
The guy in the know.
The guy that
I'm not gonna admit
knows
that.
it all.
Can we call you Jamie Little's brother?
You know what?
Or husband. How about husband?
I was going to say,
Okay.
I'd rather marry her.
Yeah,
She's
she'd be very marryable. So there was some big changes. NASCAR deciding to leave the carburetor world and head to EFI. And Andrew, you were going to talk a little bit about that.
You know what? It actually breaks my heart. It kind of, we're going to start off like this. Last year, Brad Keselowski got fined $25,000 for saying that this is just a publicity stunt. You know what? To me, I've been born and raised in car parts. Electrical stuff, let's get serious here. This is racing. For the fans, it's not going to be any different. They're not going to understand anything about this. They don't get to see the carburetors. They don't get to see the guys working on the cars. They won't know the difference. The one thing the fans might know is the fuel mileage.
Yeah.
This is going to make the fuel run longer. The car's going to run longer laps.
And as far as I was told, this was one of the reasons. This is another step of NASCAR trying to become more eco-friendly.
Eco-friendly,
Reduce their carbon footprint, as you would call it. Last year, switching to the new fueling canister to try to spill less fuel, although I'm not quite sure that really worked out well. Switching to the E85 fuel, and now to this EFI.
Like I said, I just don't like this move. What they're doing is taking away screwdrivers and wrenches and placing them with keys on a keyboard. Instead of guys huddling around a hood of a car, they're going to be huddling around a computer in the pit row now.
Right, because they're going to be able to, if they have EFI problems, they'll just plug right into the EFI and be able to try to problem solve it a little bit.
Not only is NASCAR doing it, really they got that kind of stuff going on in the dirt world too.
Mm-hmm.
They got this new engine called a CT525. It's all electronically ran. Now, one of them wires go bad. Whose fault is it? Is it the engine guy, or is it the damn wiring and electronics? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's going to be obviously eco-friendly,
which is important. With as much fuel and fumes as NASCAR spills out, it's important for NASCAR to kind of step up and say, we do need to be making some changes.
Okay, Andrew, you drive a Chevy pickup. Mm-hmm. It's fuel injected. You like it?
I guess I like it. I like the truck.
Exactly. Would you rather drive that, or would you rather drive a 1975 Chevy carbureted truck? And there's a point I'm making here. The point is, it's called evolution. The sport is going to evolve whether we like it or not. You may not like it, but it's going to go there. So that you have to respect that right there. Now, to me, I like it. I like the EFI. Now, in the dirt track world, I think in the dirt track world, you should be forced to learn how to wrench on the cars. You should know what to look for and whatnot. Now, at their level, you're getting paid $500,000 a year to be a crew chief. I could see the electronics in the game. Now, at our level, with the B mods or the late models, or an A mod or something, let's have these guys learn how to wrench on a car versus just sitting in front of a computer. If once you've gotten to Darian Grubb or Steve Addington's level, you already know how to wrench.
Right.
So
yeah, but it's going to kick them older guys out. What it's going to do is the guys that know stuff about cars, they're going to slowly get moved away. These guys, the engineers, the guys, the IT network people, they're the ones going to be ended up getting brought into this kind of stuff. Because personally, you probably know how to change jets on a carburetor. These guys, you don't probably know anything about the electronic fuel injection.
And that was one of the major, I wouldn't say major, but an issue that was coming up was that if there is a software issue with this EFI, you can't do anything about a software issue. But as far as they've been able to test so far, all of the testing at Daytona they've done over the last year, and the Bud Shootout, not one issue has come up.
Well,
not
I
a single
think,
one. And we're in testing. That's an important thing to understand. Testing is different than race. Mm-hmm. And things do come up in races that don't come up in testing. So maybe we have an issue, but this is an evolution of the sport. There's going to be issues.
What's going on with this electronic fuel injection in wiring and whatnot? This is not like what's on your everyday Toyota Corolla or Chevy Cavalier running down the street. I mean, this is a one-off, custom-made electronic fuel-injected wiring principle going on that these guys are trained They know what they're doing. I just, I knew years ago, whether it would be the following year or 10 years or 15 years down the road, I knew this was coming. And so I'm excited. I think it brings something a little different, something a little new to the sport, breathes a little bit of life into it. Now, I kind of see your point, Andrew, and the way I take it is you like the old school way of thinking and working on race cars. They're a race car. There's a reason why you grab a 9/16 inch and not a laptop. And I love the old school mentality, but like I said, you got to respect that. It's evolving. Whether you like it or not, it's going to go there. In 10, 15 years, we're probably going to be on fuel injection, I think, in the dirt. You give it 20 years, and we'll all be on fuel injected. Look at the sport compacts. They're all fuel injected. How many carbureted sport compacts do you see?
Well, none. Obviously, it's going to save money for the sport. That's the biggest thing. It's going to save money for the sport. They're obviously, again, eco-friendly. My mentality of it, I've had a grandpa who can build an engine from the ground up, nothing, no problem. What's a guy like him going to do behind a laptop? He's never, ever used a computer before in his life. How am I supposed to sit there and say, Grandpa, come over and help me set the timing, help me set the jets on this thing? He's going to look at that laptop and say, get that you-know-what out of this garage, put a carburetor back on, and then he could do it for you.
Yeah. The problem is when you look at people in that age range, though, and you look at how many people are 50 and younger that were brought up around fuel injection, how many of those older people that know the carbureted stuff, how many of those are left? They're going to be, and it is what it is. They're going to be dying off. They're going to be passing away. And the next thing you know, in 10 years, those 50, 60-year-olds, all they're going to know is the fuel injection.
Mm-hmm. So that's the EFI changes. There's also been some rule changes, and you talked about the Brad Keselowski $25,000 fine. Was that one of those secret fines that managed to slip out?
Nobody heard about it. This was something that you had to really do some research to figure out on it, and it was just something that kind of popped up. I remember it in the back of my head. I'm not personally a big Brad Keselowski fan. I think they gave him $20,000 for this and $5,000 for being the ugliest driver in the game. But it was just something I remember him talking about, and I go, wait a minute, didn't somebody get in trouble for this? So, yes, that was one of those secret fines that nobody hears about.
And NASCAR's been doing this for years, and basically they're like any other sport. They don't like you talking bad about the organization and their direction and the things they do. Tony Stewart said it years and years and years ago after he got one of these supposed super secret fines. It's their basketball, it's their court, it's their hoop, it's their arena. I'm just here to play.
Yep.
You got to play by their rules, but it doesn't make it right. And NASCAR has been fining drivers for speaking out against things like if they said that NASCAR's screwing things up, they don't like this change, or Brad Keselowski saying that the EFI is just a publicity stunt. They will secretly fine them, and they have been doing this for years. Well, it's been slowly coming out, and so now, no more secret fines. They're going to put that stuff out into the public.
I like the public fines myself.
I don't think that they're going to stop fining him for talking bad about NASCAR. I just think people are now going to know that Brad Keselowski got fined $25,000 for saying something bad about a future implementation.
If you're a fan of Brad Keselowski or Tony Stewart or Casey Kane or whoever you follow, a lot of these drivers sometimes, not all of them, but sometimes you'll have a driver that's going to come off one way on camera and be totally two-faced and be different behind the scenes. We've seen it at the dirt tracks. I'm sure it happens at the NASCAR level. I don't know with who, but it does happen. So now when NASCAR goes, well, this guy came back and badmouthed us and ran the sport, and we find him, then it lets the fans get a better idea of just who's who in NASCAR, and that it can give them a better idea of who they really want to cheer for.
Well, it's just like every sport. They got to have the good guy and the bad guy. NFL football, they seem to find the same guys every single week. They turned Ndamukong Suh into the bad guy nowadays, when he used to be just a perfect guy here in Nebraska.
Yeah.
They got Kyle Busch, obviously the bad guy. Carl Edwards, obviously the good guy.
So that was another one of the rule changes. Another one that was kind of they've made a lot of rule changes in the offseason to break up the tandem racing at Daytona, and we're going to see this as a big example of this coming up in a couple of hours when they throw the green flag. But NASCAR has made a lot of changes in the offseason to break up this tandem racing. Personally, I'm not a fan of the tandem racing. I like the pack racing.
Well, now, see, the pack racing, I've always liked the pack racing, but when you went to the tandem racing, there was a little bit more strategy, and you could see who was really working with who. And while I was always a bigger fan of the pack, I respected the tandem racing.
Right.
But after watching the Bud Shootout, what NASCAR did, and I think you and I were talking some time ago, Dan, they went 10 years back. They didn't take the sport back 10 years. They brought the level of excitement from 10 years ago back.
Right.
So it's, we're going retro for the very first time all over again. And it was so fun. And with the new changes to the rear spoiler, and you got that left side wicker bill on the car, and the cars don't have as much rear percentage. I mean, you're barely touching somebody, and the cars are all over the track. I mean, we saw just how amazing of a driver Kyle Busch is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if
to
Andrew
save
can
that
do
car
that.
twice. I don't think anybody can do that. I firmly believe he is the only driver that can save a car like that.
That was, and I'm the world's biggest fan of Tony Stewart, but I'm going to go on a limb. I don't even know if Tony could have done that. I mean, that was just amazing driving. Not at 100 mile an hour, or 150, at 190 mile an hour.
Right. So one of the changes they did make was you cannot talk between drivers anymore. With the tandem racing, the last couple of years at the super speedways, they have made it so that Carl could talk with one of his other Roush Fenway drivers so that they could communicate as far as, slow down, accident in front, or cars slow ahead, going to the left lane, going to the right lane. There was a lot of communications, and they've banned that. You can no longer talk between drivers anymore. And we saw the repercussion of that at the Bud Shootout, to where there was 2-3 cars pushing each other in the pack racing, but nobody could communicate as far as where they were going. And I got to give Juan Pablo Montoya and Jamie McMurray some credit, because they went through the field one time. They switched lanes 2 or 3 times, seamless, without any communication. So that's where everyone else is going to need to come up to, because they can't talk between radios anymore.
I think the fact that you cannot communicate from car to car just brought racing itself, the mentality, it just brought it back to the sport. I understand these guys are saying, we'd like to have the drivers' communication from car to car for safety reasons. I understand that. But I know, Andrew, you and I, we don't get that at I-80 or Eagle, wherever we go racing.
It might be a good idea that drivers can't communicate sometimes.
well, we're busy enough, and even in NASCAR, you don't want somebody in your ear calling you every 4-letter word in the book.
Right.
But by not, like I said, by them not letting them talk from car to car, you literally made the drivers race the cars again.
Well, me, I'm a tandem racing guy. I seriously think that brings the drivers out, and I'm gonna put it into a point of view of, I'm gonna actually ask you a question real quick, Dan. If you own the car, would you want tandem racing or would you want pack racing?
I want tandem,
because obviously when pack racing comes about, one car gets loose, takes 20 of them out. Tandem racing, one car gets loose, these guys can move. They can save it.
Right.
The cars are overheating. They overheat worse when they do the pack racing.
Right.
You see the guys in the tandem racing, they'll lightly slip out, let some air get into their radiator and go. I like this. I enjoy seeing it, but the reason why most of us enjoy the pack racing is because we all like that big wreck.
Right. And we'll just go ahead and say this right off the bat, and it's a given. We like to see the wrecks, but we don't like to see the injuries.
We don't like the injuries.
No.
We don't like to see the pocket. It's not our money, so we enjoy it. But.
So don't sit here and think that we like to see drivers get hurt. I mean, I've got 2 dirt track races in front of me. Obviously, you guys don't like to see anybody get hurt.
No.
As a fan of the sport and as an observer, I like to see the big accidents. Listen, that wreck that when Jeff Gordon spun out Kyle Busch during the Bud Shootout and Busch slid sideways, sparks are flying. There's sparks all over these cars. Cars are spinning out. That was exciting.
Everybody's still talking about it.
But the problem is, and I feel bad, Phoenix Racing, they've only got a couple of cars, and they don't have much money. Well, Kurt Busch destroyed one car because it was the pack racing accident during the practice, destroyed that car, and then later in the race during the Bud Shootout, destroyed that car because he got caught up in pack racing. It wasn't Phoenix Racing's fault. It wasn't Kurt Busch's fault. It was what Andrew was saying. It was a consequence of the pack racing and these smaller organizations that don't have the money to bring 5 or 6 cars down to the track. Now they've got to buy they've got to buy 2 new cars, and depending on what happens in a couple of hours, they may have to buy 3 new cars, and they don't have the money to spend on that kind of stuff. So I completely agree with you. You've got a really good point there. As an owner and as a driver, I like tandem racing, but owners and drivers don't drive the ratings. Okay, drivers do, but obviously, but it's the viewers that enjoy the pack racing more because it's much more tense. It's 3 wide, and they even went 4 wide at some points on that track. So it makes the racing much more intense, and it adds that level of excitement of the big one.
Here's why I like the pack racing. You got 10 cars or even 15 cars all packed up right there, bumper to bumper. That guy in 15th, within a tenth of a second, is now the leader. And I agree with you guys with the tandem racing. It's safer for the drivers. But the problem is you'll have, 10 cars out there. You got 5 groups tandem racing. The problem is they're spread out over an entire straightaway at Daytona. Well, that guy that's actually sitting in 10th, he's not going to be up first anytime real super soon. But when you the drama and the excitement is just tenfold when you got the big pack racing. And unfortunately, guys like you, Dan, like to see the big wreck. You don't want to see the guys get hurt.
Right.
With that being said, I like the pack racing. It's more exciting to watch. So
today's race is going to be very uncertain. I think we understand that because there was a lot of rule changes. One of them that you and I were talking about walking in, Bud, was the award for leading halfway. It's a $200,000
bonus for the midway leader.
Right, which is going to add, I think this is going to make, we were talking about it, and my initial reaction was that it was aimed at the guys who like to hang out in the back for 95% of the race. It was aimed at getting those guys to be more active in the race. But frankly, when it comes to saving your car and staying in the back, which is essentially what those guys are trying to do, when you got Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson are the two that always stay in the back and stay out of trouble. They do that, again, stay out of trouble. Don't damage your car. Leading it halfway to get yourself $200,000, I don't think that's a big deal for them.
No, well, I don't know. I mean, you may not think it's a big deal, but they're just going to look at it as a win factor, and they're gonna want that. The $200,000, they're going to want their $200,000, and they're going to want that W factor. They didn't win the race, but they're going to be like, well, yeah, I won the bonus for leading the race at halfway point, so they're going to go after that hard.
If I'm Jimmy Johnson, it's worked for him several years in a row to where he's laid in the back, stayed out of trouble, and then with about 15 to go, makes his way to the front, and he starts challenging. I would stay in the back, stay out of trouble, rather than risking that push to the front and try to get that $200,000 and the possibility of wrecking my car, because that wrecking my car is going to cost me way more than $200,000.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a big enough reward to make it for the risk, but I think you were bringing up the point that it's going to make the smaller drivers, Phoenix Racing, for instance, the ones that really do need that $200,000, they're going to be the ones that are going to make the push for the money.
Well, I want you to go back and look real quick. The three drivers that were in the chase, halfway through the chase, was Harvick, Stewart, and Edwards. I was sitting at Talladega last year, and that's one of the same as Daytona. Talladega is the same as Daytona. Harvick was at the front. Stewart was at the front. Edwards was in the back. Okay, at the end of the race, Harvick was out because he got into a wreck. Stewart ended up in the front. Edwards ended up in the back. Yeah. I think you see the more aggressive drivers are going to be in the front. I don't think Tony's going to lag in the back at all. I don't think honestly, it's not that he doesn't care. That dude just wants to lead every lap and win every race. Kyle Busch is not going to lag in the back. I guarantee that one.
Well, the checkered flag has flown on another edition of the Front Stretch. Want to say thanks to Dr. Dean Sicking for joining us. Talked about the safer barrier walls that he and his team created at the University of Lincoln. And I want to say thanks to him for joining us. Make sure you tune in next week right here on AM 590 as we're going to be breaking down what happened at the Daytona 500 and what's going to happen at Phoenix for the Subway Fresh Take 500. This has been another edition of the Front Stretch presented by Joe's Karting on AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio.
Buddy! Hi, I'm Buddy Ray, driver of the number 25 Party Pantry Modified. When I'm headed to the track or my family needs a fill-up, we all head down to the Party Pantry, locally owned and operated just off the beaten path in Council Bluffs on 35th and 5th Avenue. Party Pantry has some of the area's best prices on food, snacks, beer, and gas, and has a great liquor selection. So stop by and see the whole crew at 35th and 5th Avenue in Council Bluffs, just off the beaten path, where you're treated like family with a name and you're not just a stranger.
Are you ready for fast-paced, adrenaline-pumping, wheel-to-wheel racing right here in the Metro? Get to Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs and see what it's like to race real go-karts. Joe's Indoor Karting knows it's no fun to race go-karts at 10 miles an hour, so they ripped the governors out, and now the only restriction is how good you are at racing. It's full-throttle, white-knuckle racing every day of the week. Head over to joeskarting.com for hours, prices, and specials, or give Buddy a call today and set up your group races at 712-256-3075.